In December 1937, as winter cloaked the ancient city of Nanking, the Imperial Japanese Army closed in with a ferocity that would soon stain history with unspeakable cruelty. For the people of China's capital, the nightmare began when the invaders breached the city walls. What followed was not a mere battle, but a descent into barbarity so deep that the world would come to know it as the Rape of Nanking. It remains one of the darkest chapters in human history, a moment when civilization itself seemed to collapse under the weight of hatred and war. The seeds of this tragedy were sown years earlier. In the 1930s, Japan's leaders were driven by imperial ambition and a sense of racial superiority. The empire sought to dominate East Asia, believing it was destined to rule over weaker nations. After the 1931 occupation of Manchuria, Japan's military grew bolder, ignoring international condemnation. China, vast and fragmented, appeared vulnerable. Its government under Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek struggled to unify the nation while resisting Japanese encroachment. By 1937, tensions exploded into full-scale war following the Marco Polo Bridge incident near Beijing. Japan's military machine was modern, disciplined, and ruthless. The Chinese army, brave but poorly equipped, fought valiantly but suffered devastating losses. The fall of Shanghai in November 1937 opened the path to Nanking, the heart of China's political power. For Japan's high command, capturing the capital was both a strategic victory and a symbol of dominance. For the soldiers indoctrinated with militarist ideology, it became an opportunity for vengeance after months of fierce fighting. As Japanese troops advanced toward Nanking, Chiang Kai-shek made the difficult decision to withdraw his central government to Chongqing. The capital's defenses were left to General Tang Shengji, who commanded roughly 100,000 soldiers. However, morale was shattered. Many troops were inexperienced, exhausted, and lacked proper equipment. Civilians, numbering over 500,000, remained trapped inside the walled city. They could hear the distant thunder of artillery growing closer by the hour. The sense of dread was palpable. By early December, the Japanese forces surrounded Nanking. Their commanders promised a swift victory. On December 13, 1937, the city fell. But instead of restoring order, the victors unleashed a torrent of brutality. For 6 weeks, Nanking became a living hell. Historians estimate that around 300,000 people were killed and tens of thousands of women were raped. The atrocities committed were so monstrous that even some Japanese officers recorded their disbelief in diaries and letters. Eyewitnesses described scenes of horror beyond imagination. Soldiers roamed the streets in drunken mobs. Civilians were dragged from their homes and executed by gunfire, bayonets, or decapitation. Rivers ran red as corpses were dumped into the Yangtze. Families were torn apart before each other's eyes. Women, from young girls to grandmothers, were assaulted and killed. Temples, hospitals, and schools offered no refuge. The Japanese army, once considered disciplined, had turned into a force of uncontrolled savagery. Even more chilling were the so-called killing contests. Japanese newspapers of the time proudly reported officers competing to see who could behead the most Chinese captives. Such acts were celebrated as feats of bravery, revealing a complete moral collapse within the ranks. What occurred in Nanking was not random violence, it was systematic terror. Prisoners of war were bound and executed in groups, often for sport. Mass graves filled the outskirts of the city. Smoke from burning homes darkened the sky for weeks. Yet amid the horror, a few individuals stood as beacons of humanity. Within Nanking's walls, a small group of foreigners refused to flee. They established what became known as the Nanking Safety Zone, a neutral area meant to protect civilians. Among them was John Rabe, a German businessman and member of the Nazi Party, who used his political affiliation to negotiate with Japanese officers. Alongside him was Minnie Vautrin, an American missionary at Ginling Women's College, who risked her life to shelter thousands of women and children. These individuals bore witness to the unspeakable, recording their experiences in diaries that would later serve as critical evidence of the atrocities. Rabe's diary entries capture the haunting reality of those days. He described corpses lining the streets, desperate families begging for protection, and soldiers dragging women away, screaming. Despite his affiliation with the Nazi Party, Rabe pleaded with Japanese officials to stop the killings. His letters to Berlin and Tokyo revealed the scale of the horror, and his disbelief that a supposedly civilized army could behave with such barbarity. Meanwhile, Minnie Vautrin's writings reveal her anguish as she tried to protect women from daily raids. She documented assaults, murders, and the emotional toll of hearing the cries of victims echo through the night. The outside world initially knew little of what had happened. Foreign journalists who escaped the city smuggled out photographs, films, and testimonies. Their reports, once published, shocked readers across the globe. But international response was muted. The League of Nations issued condemnations, yet no real intervention followed. Western powers were preoccupied with the growing threat of war in Europe. For China, Nanking became a symbol of betrayal, not only by Japan but by a world that had failed to act. In the years that followed, Japan attempted to erase or deny what had occurred. Official reports minimized the number of deaths. Propaganda framed the invasion as a liberation of Asia from Western influence. After World War II, the International Military Tribunal for the Far East and the Nanking War Crimes Tribunal brought several perpetrators to justice. But many high-ranking officers escaped punishment. The scars left on China were not merely physical, they were psychological and generational. For decades, survivors carried their trauma in silence, fearing disbelief or retaliation. In the 1980s and 1990s, renewed scholarship and survivor testimonies reignited global awareness of the Nanking Massacre. Iris Chang's groundbreaking 1997 book, The Rape of Nanking, brought the tragedy to the forefront of public consciousness. Her meticulous research and emotional narrative forced a new generation to confront the enormity of the crime. The book also exposed ongoing denial within parts of Japanese society. Chang's work sparked both outrage and dialogue, ensuring that the victims' stories would not be forgotten. Today, Nanjing, the modern name of the city, stands as both a thriving metropolis and a site of solemn remembrance. The memorial hall for the victims of the Nanjing Massacre draws millions each year. Its exhibits display photographs, personal artifacts, and testimonies that bear witness to the horror. Every December, sirens sound across the city to commemorate those who perished. School children bow their heads in silence. The memory of Nanking is not merely a part of Chinese history. It is a moral lesson for all humanity. The Rape of Nanking raises profound questions about the nature of war and the fragility of human conscience. How could ordinary men commit such atrocities? Historians point to the dehumanizing indoctrination within the Imperial Japanese Army, where soldiers were taught absolute obedience and contempt for the enemy. Brutality became normalized. Compassion was seen as weakness. When combined with the chaos of urban warfare and lack of oversight, the result was catastrophic. But the story of Nanking is not only one of despair. Amid darkness, there were moments of courage. The foreigners who stayed risked their lives for strangers. Chinese civilians showed remarkable resilience, finding ways to protect each other despite unimaginable danger. Even some Japanese soldiers later expressed remorse, confessing their crimes decades afterward. These glimmers of humanity remind us that even in hell, conscience can survive. As we reflect on the massacre nearly a century later, its lessons remain painfully relevant. The atrocities of Nanking warn us about the consequences of unchecked militarism and the dangers of denying truth. When nations glorify violence and suppress accountability, history repeats itself. The ghosts of Nanking whisper to every generation, "Remember us, so it never happens again." The legacy of the Rape of Nanking endures not as a relic of the past, but as a mirror to the present. It demands that we confront injustice wherever it arises, that we speak for the voiceless, and that we guard against the erosion of empathy. Because once humanity is lost, the descent into darkness is swift and absolute. The aftermath of the Rape of Nanking extended far beyond the city's ruins. It left a scar across the conscience of the world. For the survivors, the memory was an open wound that never fully healed. They carried the trauma in silence through decades of censorship, political turmoil, and cultural change. Yet their memories would eventually resurface, demanding that the world bear witness once again. In the years immediately following 1937, Nanking became a ghost city. Buildings lay in ashes, streets were littered with debris and bones, and the air reeked of death. Many survivors hid in fear of returning soldiers or collaborators. Families searched the ruins for missing loved ones, often finding only clothing or fragments of jewelry as proof of life. Foreigners who had documented the atrocities soon left China, but their reports began to circulate abroad, shaping global understanding of what had occurred. Still, the full scale of the massacre remained difficult to comprehend. After World War II, the world's attention turned to reconstruction and the punishment of Axis powers. The Nanking atrocities were addressed in the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, held in Tokyo between 1946 and 1948. Evidence from foreign witnesses, photographs, and Chinese survivors painted a devastating picture. Japanese General Iwane Matsui, who commanded the Central China Area Army during the massacre, was convicted and executed. Prince Asaka, a member of Japan's imperial family and a key figure in the Nanking operation, was spared due to his royal status. Many others who played direct roles in the atrocities escaped prosecution entirely. For the victims, justice felt partial and delayed. China itself was in turmoil during this period. The civil war between the nationalists and the communists resumed shortly after Japan's surrender. As the Communist Party eventually rose to power in 1949, the government shifted its focus toward nation-building. The Nanking Massacre, though never forgotten, became a politically sensitive subject, used to unite the people against foreign aggression, but seldom discussed in detail publicly. It wasn't until decades later, during the reform era of the 1980s, that survivors began to share their stories openly. Their voices would reignite global awareness of the tragedy. One of the most significant contributions to the memory of Nanking came from historical researchers and journalists. The rediscovery of John Rabe's diary in Germany in the 1990s provided first-hand evidence of the massacre's scale. Rabe's writings were deeply human, filled with compassion, fear, and disbelief at the cruelty surrounding him. He had risked his life to protect the innocent, and his diary became a powerful testament to moral courage. Similarly, the letters and records of Minnie Vautrin revealed not only the horrors she witnessed, but also her emotional breakdown from the overwhelming burden of trying to save others. Vautrin returned to the United States after the war, but was haunted by nightmares, ultimately taking her own life in 1941. Her sacrifice is remembered as one of selfless devotion. The debate over the Nanking Massacre continued to rage in Japan. While many Japanese historians and citizens acknowledged the atrocities, nationalist factions sought to minimize or deny them. Textbook controversies erupted as right-wing groups attempted to rewrite history by reducing the estimated death toll or omitting references to the mass rapes. These actions infuriated China and strained diplomatic relations between the two nations. To the Chinese people, denial was not just revisionism, it was a second wound. It felt like an attempt to erase the suffering of hundreds of thousands of victims. Meanwhile, survivors became the living conscience of history. Elderly men and women began to record oral testimonies describing in detail what they had endured as children or young adults. Their words carried the raw emotion of lived experience. The sound of gunfire, the smell of burning homes, the cries of their families. Many could not finish their stories without breaking down. These testimonies were later preserved in museums, archives, and documentaries, ensuring that the truth would not fade with time. Internationally, the Nanking Massacre began to be studied alongside other major atrocities of the 20th century, such as the Holocaust and the Cambodian genocide. Scholars examined the patterns of dehumanization, propaganda, and obedience that enabled ordinary soldiers to become executioners. They found chilling similarities: the systematic erosion of empathy, the demonization of the enemy, and the belief in absolute loyalty to the state. From Nanking to Auschwitz, the lesson was the same. When individuals surrender morality to ideology, humanity is lost. The process of reconciliation between China and Japan has been slow and complicated. Some Japanese leaders have expressed remorse, offering apologies for wartime aggression. Emperor Akihito, during his reign, made subtle but meaningful gestures of atonement. However, political tensions and historical disputes often reignite old wounds. In China, the massacre remains a powerful symbol of victimization, but also of national resilience. Commemoration ceremonies in Nanjing each December are attended by thousands who light candles, lay flowers, and bow their heads in silence. Bells ring across the city, echoing the promise to remember the dead and guard against forgetting. The Nanjing Massacre Memorial Hall, built in 1985, stands on the very ground where many victims were buried. Its architecture is stark and haunting. Cold stone walls, dim lighting, and displays of skulls and bones remind visitors of the enormity of the crime. At the center stands a sculpture of a mother holding her dead child, a universal symbol of grief. The memorial is not meant to provoke hatred, but to inspire reflection. Its inscription reads, "Forgive, but never forget." This message captures the moral essence of remembrance, the pursuit of peace through the acknowledgement of truth. Modern historians emphasize that understanding the Rape of Nanking is not merely about recounting statistics or condemning a nation. It is about confronting the human capacity for evil and the moral responsibility of societies to resist it. The massacre shows how war can strip away layers of civilization until nothing remains but raw cruelty. It also illustrates how individuals, through small acts of compassion, can preserve humanity even in hellish conditions. Each testimony, each document, and each photograph serves as a moral warning to future generations. The Rape of Nanking has also become an enduring subject in film, literature, and education. Movies such as City of Life and Death and documentaries like Nanking have sought to visualize the trauma for global audiences. Art installations, poems, and novels continue to reinterpret the tragedy, each generation finding new meaning in the story. For educators, teaching the massacre is an act of moral vigilance, an effort to prevent history from being silenced or distorted. As survivors pass away, their legacy depends on those who continue to tell their stories. Beyond remembrance, the lessons of Nanking extend into contemporary debates about war crimes, international justice, and humanitarian intervention. The massacre demonstrates why accountability matters. When crimes go unpunished, they invite repetition. The world's failure to act decisively in 1937 foreshadowed later atrocities in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Each time the international community hesitates, the ghosts of Nanking rise to remind us of what inaction costs. Today, as the last living witnesses grow old, their testimonies become ever more precious. They remind us that history is not an abstract record, it is lived experience. Their memories, often recounted through trembling voices and tearful pauses, bridge the gap between past and present. When they speak, they do not only recall horror, but affirm survival. Their endurance is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. The story of the Rape of Nanking does not end with death or despair. It ends with remembrance, resilience, and the determination to build a world where such atrocities can never happen again. Modern Nanjing is a city of life, innovation, and renewal, standing as proof that even the most shattered places can heal. But healing does not mean forgetting. Every December, as the winter winds blow across the Yangtze, candles flicker in remembrance. Each flame honors a life lost, a story silenced, and a warning to humanity. The Rape of Nanking remains one of the most haunting reminders of the darkness within mankind. Yet within that darkness, light endured, in the courage of witnesses, in the compassion of strangers, and in the enduring will to remember. As long as the world continues to speak their names, the victims of Nanking will never truly die. Their story stands as both a memorial and a mandate to confront hatred, to uphold truth, and to protect the fragile thread of humanity that binds us all.